So in this segment, we're going to cover the basics of SSI eligibility. SSI is a federal cash assistance program administered by the states and is based on showing a sufficient evidence of disability and financial need. Now, by the way, under SSI, there is no minimum age limit for establishing eligibility based on blindness or disability. With the SSI, because we're in California, California is one of a number of states that has a state supplement. Under the California State Supplementary Payment Program, or SSP, it's a monthly payment program that supplements the SSI benefits for low-income California residents. In 2025, the maximum monthly SSP is $239.94 for individuals and $607.83 for couples. The total benefit for an individual then in 2025 is $1,206.94 for an individual, and it's $2,222.83 for a couple. Now, the way we get to that for an individual is that we take the $967, which is the federal benefit rate for SSI in 2025, and add to that the state supplement, which brings us to a total of $1,206.94. So I've always found when you're trying to make sense of SSI eligibility, it's best to think of this as a three-part test. So part one is whether or not you meet the definition of being disabled. Part two is the income test, which determines how much you receive. And part three is the resource test, which determines your eligibility. So let's walk our way through this. As far as meeting the definition of disability, merely having a diagnosis of a disabling condition is not enough. As far as Social Security is concerned, to meet the definition of disability, first off, the benefits recipient must be under the age of 65, shall not be able to engage in substantial gainful activity because of a physical or mental impairment that's expected to last a year or longer in death. And the third part of that is that you have to show that the person who is disabled is unable to consistently earn $1,620. Now, the number is different if you are blind. So test number two is the income test, which determines how much you receive. So when we're talking about income, there's three types of income that we are usually talking about. The first type of income is unearned income, which is basically any cash or payments from annuities or pensions or alimony payments or interest or dividends or anything that goes directly to the beneficiary. So what's common with unearned income is if the benefits recipient receives any cash, it'll reduce their benefits dollar for dollar after the first $20, which is called the $20 set aside. So an example would be, let's say what you wanted to do is instead of doing a special needs trust or whatever, if you wanted to leave somebody, for instance, an annuity that would pay them $100 a month, and the person is on SSI, SSI wouldn't count the first $20, but the person's benefits would be reduced by $80 a month. So that's a basic principle of SSI, that for persons on SSI, you cannot give them cash. Now, the next type of income is earned income. And the basic rule about earning income when you're on SSI is that if you earn it, you lose $1 for every $2 you earn after the first $65. So the example would be, what if Kathy were to earn $265 in the month of January? Well, here's what would happen. They wouldn't count the first $65, but they once again would take the remaining $200 and reduce her benefits $1 for every $2 she earned. So what would happen would be that she would get to keep $165, but her SSI would be reduced by $100. The third type of income can be one of the most complexing areas of all, and it's an area that's gone under a lot of change, which is the concept of in-kind support and maintenance. So the basic rule is that if you have an SSI recipient and you provide them with shelter, including utilities, their benefits will be reduced dollar for dollar, capped at what's called the presumed maximum value rate, which is $342.33. Now here would be the example. Let's say you had a situation where we have an SSI recipient who is living in an apartment that's $1,500 a month. And let's say what happened was the trustee were to pay the landlord directly from the Special Needs Trust. Now, in this case, our benefits recipient didn't get any cash directly, so there's no unearned income, but they did get housing. And what would happen is the person's benefits would be reduced dollar for dollar, capped at $342.33 in 2025. If this is an issue that affects your benefits recipient, look for further resources on the Dale Law Firm website, because there have been some changes in this area and there might be a workaround. The last program that we want to cover is the resource test. We get a lot of really good guidance about resources from a publication called SSI Spotlight on Resources. So let's say what they have to say. Once again, a resource is money as well as something you own that you can turn into cash. Examples of resources would be property, stocks, bonds, and bank accounts. Why are the resources important for SSI eligibility? Well, for SSI, it's a needs-based program, and to get SSI, your countable resources must not be worth more than $2,000 for the individual or $3,000 for a couple, and this is what's called the resource limit. Countable resources are things you own that count towards the resource limit, but there's many things that don't count. So the following things generally do not count for the resource limit. One is the home or residence that you live in and the land that it's on. Another one is a vehicle if you are a member of your household and you use it for transportation. Another one are household goods and personal effects that you can own without limitation. You can also own a life insurance policy with a cash surrender value no more than $1,500. You can own a burial plot or spaces for you or your immediate family without limitation. And you can also hold burial funds up to $1,500 each for you and your spouses for burial expenses. One last thing about SSI and eligibility for resources is that if the SSI recipient receives at least $1 of SSI, then in California, the beneficiary will get full scope Medi-Cal with no share of cost. Last part of this is that the Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid in other states. And every state provides for Medicaid, and there's certain mandatory benefits that have to be provided. So Medi-Cal does provide inpatient hospital services, outpatient hospital services, home health services, including in-home support services, physician services, laboratory and x-ray services, transportation to medical care. And California also provides dental care called Denti-Cal. And there's a number of regional center benefits that are either dependent or enhanced by eligibility for Medi-Cal.